All right. Welcome to the Rebuild Procurement Podcast, the number 2 potentially procurement podcast in the world, where we dive deep into topics to keep procurement people up to date and ahead of their peers. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're getting your podcast. Just click like, subscribe, and help us out there. Alan, I'm going to let you tee this one off.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Tom. We got a very special guest on the pod today. He's been a long-time procurement guy with a long, illustrious career with some of procurement's top companies. As you heard from the intro, Tom likes to say we're the number 1 procurement podcast because we want it to be so. But this guy has been at it since November 4th, 2015 with his first episode. Unbelievable.
Wow.
Over 10 years ago. He has over 900 episodes. He's had anyone in procurement on his show. He's created quite the media empire inside the world of procurement. And if there's ever such a thing as a spokesman for procurement, this guy is it. To boot, he's got a sexy as hell accent. Phil Ideson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And it's, I always talked about my accent as being when I moved here to the States. It's 20 years since I moved to the States. It's going to help me stand out. And as long as I'm not an idiot, then hopefully that's going to help me. And so that was always kind of my rule of thumb, is just don't be the idiot. And that's kind of what I've taken through with my career here in the States, I think.
All
right. So Phil, we spent a little bit of time thinking, how do you interview a guy like Phil? And so I thought maybe I would just kick it off by throwing it over to Tom, who's going to ask a favorite question.
Sure.
Yeah. So, Phil, I'm not sure if you've heard this one before or not, but did you find procurement, Phil, or did procurement find you?
Well, I may have heard that.
Is that an insightful question, Phil?
Yeah. Like 99% of people that find themselves in procurement, I definitely stumbled across it. I did an internship in the UK with GM. It was Vauxhall, the UK kind of version of GM, basically counting widgets in an automotive manufacturing facility shop floor while eating bacon sandwiches. And then, took that experience to get onto Ford's graduate program. So I joined Ford Motor Company. This will be back in like 2000 now, with this grand goal of being placed in marketing or in HR or in operations, just somewhere interesting that sounded like fun. And I was placed in purchasing. I was like, okay, I don't really know what this is. But I mean, I suppose I'll go and do this. And I never left. I thought this was going to be a 6 to 9 month rotation. Going in there, and I was given this portfolio of, I don't know, $15 or $20 million worth of interior plastics for an upcoming Jaguar
Very cool
vehicle. And I was like, okay, this is fun. I'm responsible for all this money, and I can see what I'm buying driving around on the streets. And then I realized that they will pay me to travel. And that was the kicker. So once I found that I can both, have responsibility for spending a bunch of somebody else's money and that I could travel for free, then that was kind of what kept me.
Wow. That's fantastic. And then, so from there, give us the quick spin. Yeah. Where did you go next, or where did you go next?
Yeah. So I was in automotive. There was a theme of keeping on coming back to automotive, but I was in automotive for, I did direct materials for a couple of years, went into indirects because, I probably took the career path of wanting to be more of a generalist than a specialist. I saw a lot of people in the automotive industry who were deep specialists, but I also saw that they were kind of stuck in the whims of the economy and business cycles. And it was hard once you become a real specialist, a deep specialist in one industry, to move to another industry. So I went onto the indirect materials side. Then I went from automotive, which is all about, the traditional, at least it was at the time, beating your fist on the table, demanding cost reductions from people that don't have many other choices of who they're going to supply to. So it was always a power dynamics kind of game. And also it was You were important to the business because margins were so small. So I was like, what's the opposite of a mandate culture? I'm going to go to pharma. And so I went to Pfizer, which is, extremely relationship based. They were always going through mega mergers with huge, big integration pots of money. Every dollar that I saved was a dollar that it made it harder for my stakeholder to claim for their budgets next year. So they didn't want to spend, they didn't want to save anything. And so that was, extremely like the polar opposite of automotive. But I did that because I wanted both kind of experience sets. Moved over to the States and actually did that with Pfizer in the indirect space again for a little while before I ended up back in Detroit. Back in automotive, I did some direct materials, but really what I did there was help to build a captive shared service center. This was a time of, companies starting to build shared service centers. This was 2007, 2008-ish. And from there, went over to India and lived in India for a year and helped run a captive, helped grow a captive shared service center in Chennai, where, I was the only Westerner in town of a town of, many millions of people. But just a really kind of a career-defining experience. I was still relatively young. I had no clue what I was doing. And, I was there to help grow this thing and to build it and to build process and to build cultural alignment between the teams all around the world and to help put a local leadership team in place. So we did that. I jumped from there into Chiquita. So now I'm going into consumer products. Chiquita is basically a logistics company, behind the scenes. And they just outsourced some of their procurement to a company called ICG Commerce. This was the very early days of procurement services and procurement outsourcing. So things weren't going to plan. And so I came in to help fix it, which just meant putting in scope categories that should be in scope rather than the hard ones. Let's do the easy ones and let's put some governance in place. And that was a relatively short-term kind of gig, but it kind of gave me that insight into the procurement outsourcing and services side. Came back as a practitioner to financial services, was with GMAC at the time that all the CEOs went to Congress in the US to beg for money during the recession in 2008, where I didn't know if my first paycheck would cash. But we got approval from the government to become a bank overnight. And so I spent the next, couple of years helping to turn a procurement function from a business that had no care in the world to one that had the Federal Reserve sat in our office and, would fire anybody, at will, if they weren't doing what they needed to do to have the risk pendulum swing to the completely other side. And from that, I kind of got into becoming head of international procurement. And my last kind of stop, trying to make this as quickly as possible, kind of running through, but I had so many different kind of experiences.
No kidding.
Was to kind of rejoin, not rejoin, but to go on the other side of the table with ICG Commerce, who became Procurian, and help lead a number of their engagements on the West Coast, help them grow their business from procurement outsourcing there before we got bought by Accenture. We got bought by Accenture and I was like, okay, did it for a couple of years. Wasn't really for me. Let's go and jump off a cliff. And that brings us to November the 4th, 2015, as you said in the first podcast.
Yes, I went back and listened to that first podcast. That was I remember being there, but it was good to listen to it again.
I'm not sure how well it aged. But
it aged very well. I was trying to figure out, do you still use the same bumper music?
No, but I like that bumper music. Like I should do.
It was good.
Because I keep thinking I don't really like my bumper music anymore. So I keep thinking I should go back to the classic.
Should go back and grab that one. Well, yeah, that's good. So you definitely checked almost all the boxes on your bingo card. You've been in just about every industry. You've been on both sides of the table. But now you've really, and I do mean it when I use big terms like media empire. Art of Procurement has become a media empire. Can you keep telling your story and walk us through the evolution of that? Because it started with one humble podcast, but now you've got a whole bunch of different sides of that business.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes consider myself an accidental media entrepreneur. And it was probably only the last couple of years I had the epiphany that we're running a media business here that supports procurement rather than a procurement business. And that small switch had a big mindset shift on kind of how I think about things. But really, when I started, it was about, I wanted to build a consulting practice around procurement operating model design, and how do you best leverage the hybrid in-source outsource models, and helping companies prepare for that, because I was really passionate from my time as a practitioner and then a time at Procurian that was how you get the best bang for your buck in terms of how you build your procurement operating model.
Right on.
Happened to start the podcast at the same time as a bit of a throwaway. I was like, I'd listened to all these podcasts to convince myself that now was the time I should, quit my job and take the risk. And so I looked around, and there was a couple of procurement podcasts. One actually by Kelly Barner, who's my co-partner now at Art of Procurement. And I thought, there's not much out there. It's going to give me a good excuse to speak to people who would ordinarily look at me and say, well, who's this guy? My self-narrative is that I'm an introvert. And so I thought, if I do this, it'll maybe make it easier for me to get to know people than reach out cold, because I need to start selling for my business. And the podcast went much better than I ever thought it would. Like I created it for what I was coming off being a head of procurement and doing the roles that I did. So it was to help me with my curiosity to speak to people who had been in those roles for a long time. I wasn't necessarily doing it for anything else, but I think that naturally led the conversations to be maybe at aimed at a higher level in the organization, because those are the kind of conversations I had, and that was very accidental. So I started the podcast, and I started to think, is there a way to at least monetize this a little bit? Because my bank balance is getting low. And there was one person who said yes. And, that person, which makes me very honored today to be speaking to you, was yourself. Like, you were my first sponsor of the podcast, the first time when I ever thought, maybe I can get some money. It was one of those moments where, as an entrepreneur, they tell you to frame your first check and put it on the wall. That was my moment, was when you signed up to be our first ever sponsor. That
was an easy one, Phil. That was super easy. I remember I met you in Nashville. We met face to face, and for whatever reason in my mind's eye, I could remember riding an escalator with you, and we were talking. And so you kind of talking about that procurement operating model of separating out strategic from tactical, and kind of hand off the tactical to a team that makes the most sense. I was like, gosh, this guy thinks just like we think at Denali. We gotta get on the show.
Yeah, and I remember I remember talking on some rooftop restaurant or something with you about it. It's like one of those moments that you just remember.
That's funny.
And that was the start of, okay, maybe there's a media business. And it was a very up and down roller coaster, for the next few years of trying to figure out, like, what is this? What's the potential for this? Should I be building a training business? Should I be building a media business? Should I be focusing on my consulting business? And I did none of them very well, because I was just kind of desperate to find some cash. And, I went past all the milestones you would go past, where you would say, you know what, maybe this isn't going to work and you should go back and get another job again. But I didn't feel like I could ever get another job. And like, who's going to employ me now? Because I haven't worked as a practitioner for a few years. So I have to, persistence, resilience. I have to kind of keep on going. And after a while, probably decided, it's going to be easier to get money from sales and marketing people than it is to get from procurement people.
Amen, brother.
So that was my calculation, was, for the first few years, I was like, I'm never going to take money from a service provider. Like, I never want to have any perception that anything I say is influenced in any way. I'm going to make my money from procurement, selling things to procurement. I think we all start off in this idealistic way, and then realize that, you have bills to pay. And the trick is, how do you do that in a way that that doesn't impact kind of your editorial, the content that you put out and your views. And it's a very, very fine line that we just try really, really, really hard to make sure that we're on the right side of that line while earning enough money to run a business.
Right on.
And
That's
and
great.
with that, Phil, just on the building that out, one thing I was reading, was studying up on you a bit, right? The no jerks culture
Yeah.
that you have, right? How does that play into? Obviously, it's probably the folks you talk to, but it also, I'm sure, it comes with the sponsors that you take on and things of that nature. Like, how does that roll through the organization?
I think so. This is something that when Kelly, my partner in the business, when we started working a lot more closely, was really important to her as well. And it was like, we do what we do because we want to enjoy ourselves, and of course, we want to create value in the things that we do. But we've all spent enough time working for bad bosses. And so, why would we want to come and do this to ourselves and put ourselves through all this risk to then just be working for the same bad bosses? And so, it's one of those things that it's not got there's not a yes no process or a flow that says is this person or is this company a jerk, we don't want to work with them. But you just kind of get a sense for those that are a better match from a cultural perspective than you. When we're interviewing and people that are working with us, you have to be a really close cultural fit with us because otherwise it's just not going to work. We don't want to come to work and just not enjoy the people that we're working with. So, sure. There's been there's been prospects that we have not pursued because we didn't feel that our values were aligned, or that we didn't feel like what they were trying to do in the market was aligned with our view of the market. There has been clients that we have had that we have opted not to try and pursue any renewals with because we didn't want to work with them again. And that's hard, especially when you're building and you want to take every dollar that you can from any place. But it's just important for the mental health of the team.
Now that makes a ton of sense. And, along those lines of feeling like you need to take every dollar that's out there.
Yeah.
When, being a small business person, I've experienced this myself. When did you know you really had something?
I hesitate because I still don't know if I have.
It's good and self-reflective.
No, I think there's so much PTSD of of the really hard times that when as a business we're going to grow 50 to 60% this year, which is beyond our wildest imaginations of what we would do this year. Wow. So there's obviously some there in what we're doing. But I think I will always have PTSD from the really bad hard times, the times when I had to sell my house and move cross country, or when I'm having to beg family for money that they don't necessarily have to keep us going. When I saw that there was enough dots to connect and I just wasn't sure how to connect them, I think that you always are kind of looking over your shoulder. Now, if you ask anybody else, if you ask Kelly, if you ask my business coaches, most of the people on the outside, they would probably think that I'm being crazy in answering like that because of what we have built. But it keeps me on my toes, I suppose. I just never want to look back and think that we didn't take advantage of the opportunity in front of us because we got complacent.
Yep. No, that's great. Yeah. Do you does it make sense? Can you give us the pie chart that says 25% of the revenue at Art of Procurement comes from media, 25% comes from consulting, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I think that, if you just spread it from media and services, which are really our two buckets. Within media, we have digital media, which is things like webinars, white papers, the podcasts. We have the events that we do, which is a new revenue stream for us this year, which, we can kind of talk about. We have Procure Tech Intelligence, which is a new revenue stream for us this year as well.
Yes.
So that all kind of falls under the media bucket. You're probably talking 70-30, media versus services. Some years it's 80-20, some years it's 70-30. Honestly, the services, it can be ad hoc projects that we do for folks who come and say, hey, I need some help in doing something. It can be around category strategy and sourcing. It can be around procurement, operating model design. It can be around tech stack. We do learning and development that comes our way. But they're all kind of a little random. And so we look at them and say, is this somewhere where we think we can help someone? Yes or no. We're actually being a lot more deliberate going forward in terms of where we want to focus from an advisory and a consulting. And I've gone through the years thinking, should we really be doing advisory and consulting, or should we be focusing all in on media? And strategically, at the time, it's like, well, we probably should focus on media, but that 30% of revenue that comes from services is the difference between us being able to keep going and not. So it's really, really hard as a business owner to say, okay, I'm going to give up that revenue with the hope that I'm going to make back and more by focusing over here. And I could never quite pull the trigger. I think now, 10 years later, I'm probably happy that I kept it the way I did, because now I see opportunities for us to be a lot more focused and deliberate about what we do from a services side.
Yeah. And Phil, if you were to just say like money didn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Say you just had a banger year last year and like, you know what, I'm just going to do what I want on a go forward because this is the most impactful to people. Like, where would that focus end up being?
I'd buy a football club.
Okay. Still within procurement, Phil. Still within procurement. Never mind.
I think that, so this is something that I think is going to infuse some of what I try and do next year, is this idea of, because we obviously talk a lot about transformation and where the function is going and how technology is going to evolve it. And there's varying levels of maturity on that continuum of thinking about how technology is going to evolve what we do. What no one's really talked about, which I think we should be talking about, is, okay, so let's imagine we've done all these wonderful things with AI, and we now have freed up all this time of our people. Like Alan and I spent a lot of time telling people in outsourcing they're going to free up all this time from their people if they go and outsource. So now we're just going to use AI to tell that story. But then, like, what now? So you've done it. What are you going to do with that free time? And that's kind of the biggest, the next risk that I see is that we can use technology to bring efficiencies to give ourselves more time to do more stuff. But I don't think that most organizations are in a good spot to think about how do we use that time that we freed up. We still look at sourcing as being strategic. It's like, do more sourcing. That's not really the idea of becoming more efficient. And so if you haven't already figured that out, once you've freed up these resources, what's going to happen? You're going to say, okay, I can reduce my headcount because I don't need them anymore. So you're only going to need them if you've already figured out what you want to do with them. And so that's probably, I'd lean into that idea.
Neat.
Yeah. And maybe just with that, one thing I wanted to ask you, Phil, was just, and it kind of ties into what you were saying, but if you were to talk to somebody, so you probably normally deal with the CPO level, but if you're then focusing on, you're just giving advice, some procurement person reaches out to you, sends you a DM and says, hey, Phil, like you're a smart guy and I really respect you. Like, I'm mid-career buyer, maybe I'm in strategic sourcing. What 2 to 3 skills do you think I need to double down on over the next 5 to 10 years that'll allow me to still be relevant and successful?
I'd question the judgment if they told me that I was a smart guy.
just close out the window.
But I would probably be telling them that traditional procurement skills are commoditized and will be replaced by technology. It's not about procurement anymore. It's about understanding how you use technology. So it's the kind of digital literacy, data literacy, and everything that I've talked about for 10 years around the soft skills of, EQ, relationships, curiosity. That's what really matters. It doesn't matter that, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. The hard skills in procurement are becoming more commoditized and less valued than the non-procurement skills. Like, how can you bring those skills to a procurement environment?
Yeah. Great. And I
very cool.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah, that's what we work on that every day here at Summit, is how do we raise the EQ of our team members?
Yeah.
In client service, white glove service is everything. How do you take somebody who may not have had that as a part of their upbringing, may not be a part of their fabric? Can you instill that through training? It's an interesting question. We don't have all the answers. We're certainly trying to figure it out.
Yeah, empathy. It's just understanding those. When I started in procurement, it was very black and white, and I was trained to be very black and white. And it was, why are all these bozos in the rest of the business not coming to me to buy stuff because they don't know how to buy? And plainly that's wrong. but that's how you that's the procurement psyche and mindset that I think a lot of us have built, and then a lot of us have spent time to kind of release ourselves from those shackles, so to speak, of how we think about it. But that's what leads to a very us versus them relationship, I think, with a lot of procurement teams and their stakeholders.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, Bill.
I'm still picking some threads at the business here. So you did mention two fascinating new things. I mean, you talk about, well, we don't know if we want to focus on this side or that side, the media or the services side. But the media side, you're going to have to grow services to keep up with your media side with the acquisition of Procure Tech and the kickoff of conferences. Talk about each one of those in turn. I'd love to hear what the thinking was behind that, and kind of where you're planning to take those.
And it's the Procure Tech 100 acquisition was very what's the right word for it? Like opportunistic, let's say. So when we look at events, which is kind of the first thing that we did new that there was this year, we've always been a digital media first business. And I've always thought that, one, we've always had demand, like, are you ever going to do an event? Like, no, was usually the answer.
It seems like a big step. I mean, it feels like a big risky step.
Well, it was, that was the reason why I said no all the time, was, one, I don't know what I'm doing. And two, we're bootstrapped, and, just losing a little bit of money can be the difference between us succeeding and failing. And I didn't want to, I'd heard stories of how much these events could cost to put on, which turned me away from the idea of doing it. We had a call last year, probably like last fall, like 2024, let's say September, October 2024. And one of our key partners that we work with and who sponsor some of the things that we do said, like, is there anything you've ever wanted to do that you couldn't, or that you've not had the ability to do? And I said, well, events. I'd love to do a soccer club.
Oh,
well, no. Yes. Maybe a few years' time I can broach that subject with them. So yes, I'd love to do an event. And so they said, okay, we'll sign up. We'll sign up as your presenting sponsor. I quickly got a couple of other kind of friends and family to sign up and say yes as well. To the point where I pretty much covered what the cost would be to put it on. So that was okay, let's go and do this. The reason why I wanted to do an event is because I just saw a gap in the market. Well, the two reasons. One, I think for us as a business, it's important for us to lean into in-person connection, especially, as you see more and more AI generated content. I didn't want to find that we had a business that was replaced by, ChatGPT. So how can I continue to try and protect the business, build on the brand that we have, create something that is just more than just an individual, just a digital media company. So I looked at it from that perspective. I looked at the event space and thought there is probably an opportunity within the event space, at least here in the US, for something that is, experiential, really interesting venues that are built into kind of the fabric of the events, but the event is small scale. So, 100 people, 120 people max, really focused on collaboration, peer-driven discussions, and creating a safe space where everyone in the room is here to show up and work on their businesses, work on their procurement organizations, rather than be kind of passive, absorbers of content throughout the day and then go home and do nothing. So that was kind of the vision. So we did that. We did our first one in Los Angeles in May. Now, choosing LA was probably, I did that for my own personal reasons. Yes, not necessarily because it was the best place to go and do my first ever event, but I started the business when I lived in LA. I was drawn by the idea of us being a media business and a podcast and broadcasting and kind of the history of Hollywood and everything associated with it. Found a venue on Sunset Boulevard, which was the first ever built for purpose broadcast studio in the US. In fact, maybe even the world. And so it's like the venue, the story, everything kind of was a perfect fit. I'll try and find a way to get enough people to come.
Back to Compton.
Yeah. So we did that. Had a great experience. Because the experience was a really positive one, it gave us the confidence to do another. And I asked around, and we found that people hadn't spent all of their marketing budgets yet for the year. And so we were very proud to be able to bring in a few more sponsors into the event, and did our second one in New York as we record this last month, which was at Carnegie Hall, which nice. Again is kind of, you pinch yourself.
Iconic.
Sure. Thinking that, that's kind of what we're building. And so the events for us is definitely a line of business that, we want to continue to grow and invest in, because I just think that the in-person connection is important for so many different reasons right now. The ProcureTech intelligence, as I say, was opportunistic. We're looking and looking at, everything that we've got. And obviously digitization is a huge part of the future of procurement. We as a business talk more, as we alluded to before, it's more about operating model design and what are all the elements that form part of operating model to help you increase your value, of which technology is one of them and a growing and increasing part of it.
Yeah.
When I saw, so we were thinking, do we make something? Do we create a new podcast for ProcureTech, or do we create our own program, or whatever it may be? An opportunity arose for the ProcureTech 100, maybe coming on the market just because of an acquisition of their parent company. And so I just looked at that as a bit of a make versus buy. And it was a big investment for us. It's the biggest investment we've ever made. So there's a risk for sure associated with going and doing something like that. But I felt, and I really feel that it's more than at the moment, the output of the ProcureTech 100 is a yearbook, which gets published once a year, which is a list of 100 of the most impactful, innovative, transformation driving technologies around the procurement space, as voted on by procurement practitioners. So it's CPOs, heads of procurement, heads of digital enablement and technology, heads of centers of excellence, that kind of level of people from all around the world. We have judges from all around the world who are all part of this. We don't judge, we facilitate the process. The output of which is this yearbook. But really behind it is a community. It's a community of procurement leaders who are all interested in technology and want to grow their organization. And them themselves going through this process will say, I'm confused by the market right now. I don't know where the opportunities are. Complexity is increasing all the time. They need help. They look at the ProcureTech 100 when they're shortlisting themselves to go and say, okay, I'm just going to start with these 6, let's say, in a category, versus the 20 or 30 that's in a category, as all these categories are exploding. So we thought there's an opportunity to build something behind the scenes that culminates in the ProcureTech 100, but that can be built into our digital media. It can be built into our events. The events can be another output of the judging process for the ProcureTech 100, and that we can bring folks together behind the scenes for them to talk about their challenges in a much of a safer space from peers who have actually used these technologies, as opposed perhaps to analysts who are talking about their perspectives on these technologies. But it's all about peers. And we thought looking at all those together is a really interesting thread that connects some different pieces that's different than anything else that exists today, versus building a business which is, an events company competing with other events companies, or a digital media company competing with other digital media companies. If we put all these together, plus the services, it creates something that's a little bit, unique in the industry.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, obviously, a lot of conferences have a tech component to them, but it's only really DPW that seems to have said we're going to go tech only, tech first.
Yeah.
So I think there's plenty of blue ocean there for you to sail into.
That's my hope. It feels sometimes like we're pushing a lot of boulders up a lot of hills at the same time.
You're used to that, though, right?
Yes, and you tell yourself all the time to niche down, and that's don't kind of chase too many things at once. It's just a very interesting time at the moment, with obviously all the change, and there's different opportunities, different folks copying different things. It's like, what can we do that I feel like that we can do best? And so that's what I'm really trying to focus on, how we build and grow the business.
Yeah, and it seems like a similar thread. It's almost like, I was just going to say, it's almost like the yarn, and it's kind of just getting to be a bigger ball of yarn. So to the extent you're bringing the ProcureTech 100, then the behind the scenes, you have further connections of folks that probably should be talking to better understand what's going on in the world, especially because technology is just only getting more and more important. So it does feel like there's that yarn ball growing. Yeah,
and we partner with like really leading organizations. So the ProcureTech 100, for example, our insights partner for ProcureTech 100 is McKinsey. And for
I haven't heard of them, Phil.
Yeah.
They're important, right?
We're very honored. We're proud. An organization like McKinsey is, sees value in what we're doing and what we're trying to do, 100%. And is also willing to put their brand, which is, one of the most protected brands that's out there, behind what we're doing. So, we're just trying to build as many partnerships, relationships as we can to help further the procurement community in a way that, makes it worthwhile for everybody that's involved.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, if there's any way you can steal the spider chart, rebirth the spider chart from Dr. Eloise, that would be awesome.
Yeah, it got a little bit out of control, I think, didn't it? I mean, that's what Eloise would say. There's so many. And I think that's the challenge in the market, and the opportunity is that, like, when we were looking at, when you and I first started to get to know each other 10 years ago, the number of ProcureTech companies out there was probably 10 or 20. And we're talking about, it's about Cooper versus Ariba, and that's procurement technology.
That's right.
And so now it's hundreds and hundreds. It's hard enough for us to keep track, never mind somebody whose day job is not to understand all the ins and outs of the ProcureTech market.
Yep. Very cool. Well, Tom, I don't know if did you want to throw in a question? I feel like I'm hogging the mic.
No. I think it's good. I mean, this is all just, it all goes along the same conversation points. I think the technology piece, Phil. So Alan and I, we go back and forth. I feel like at the end of the day, we're agreeing on certain things, but it's kind of timelines. So I'm definitely more pull forward what's happening with AI. I think, Alan, you're a little sure things will change, but not as quickly as you think, young buck. That's kind of the conversations that Alan and I have.
The OG has something to say.
Yeah, Ali's our what did we term it in the podcast that we did together? The AI contrarian.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Happy to be.
He leans in heavy. To that. But I think, Phil, we'll play a little game. I think that kind of goes to what the predictions of Phil Ideson, right? So going back, I looked back, you had the 2025. So every year, Phil, it's a bit of a blog post just about the upcoming year, right? Yep. So, and I think it's well done in that you focus on just the key things that you're thinking about. And the ones that you said, I only want to pull a couple from these, but the ones you had were do more with less is here to stay.
Yeah.
AI is definitely here to stay, Alan. Yep. We can talk about timeline. Process-driven activities will be automated, which we already, I think, dove into quite well. A return to stakeholder-led buying, and then the geopolitical changes, which we saw with all the tax stuff. The first one, I want to just go through two. The first being the AI is definitely here to stay. So as we talk about the spider diagram, which it has gotten very large. I see it posted on LinkedIn, here and there. It's definitely gotten large, but what are your views, Phil, I guess specifically within 2025, all the things that have changed within procurement given AI, and then maybe over the next 5 years? Like, where do you see things going? What's your short and long-term thoughts there?
So I will preface this by saying, so I can maybe sit on a fence, that the pace of change in AI is going to be limited by humans' ability to change versus, the technical capabilities. So I feel that, we're not going to be in a world where in 2 years everything changes, but that's not because the technology isn't going to be here to enable it. It's because of the essentially organizational readiness and change management that's associated with it. I think that, yeah, I mean, AI is definitely. What's interesting is, from a procurement technology market perspective, right now it's more, layering in AI onto things that are already existing. When I look 2 or 3 years out into the future, it will be, you won't know that the AI is there. It's just technology will be enable you to do different things. And it just happens behind the scenes that it's AI enabled and AI driven. But it's not necessarily not an afterthought, but a kind of bolt on. And so that's probably more likely to change our way of working, is when we don't even know that the AI is doing this stuff. It's just presenting information to us, versus us having to go and ask it things, which is essentially where we are today.
Yeah.
I think that it will have a big impact on the size of procurement teams. Even now we're hearing 20% plus of job recs are being questioned, like, can AI do this job, versus do you need to go and hire somebody? And I think it's like death by 1,000 cuts, as opposed to all of a sudden, there's less people working in procurement, because I think that's how the size of organizations changes, is one job rec at a time, versus we don't need these 100 people. But a change is coming.
Yeah. And definitely organizations are going to grow less quickly too, which I think procurement will be affected by that. The other one, and this is a bit of, and maybe it's a bit thought provoking, but just around the stakeholder led procurement and where that was going. I have a bit of a take on this, that I think there could be what AI could do, right? When I say AI, it's just, again, some of the software and something built in. So things happen more automatically. That because of that, there might only be so much need for a procurement department. And it might be more the skill set associated with that then you could take this centralization, that maybe the AI and the tools themselves are centralizing a lot of your spend, but then it gets decentralized to the actual departments and groups, that then they have a support person or a support, a portion of a person that could then support with that. So then actually the stakeholder is procurement at some point. Just curious about your thoughts on like stakeholder-led purchasing versus the centralized model.
So I agree with that. What I talk about is kind of how the operating model of procurement is evolved. So you start very decentralized, and decentralized meaning everyone's doing whatever they want. And then, you have some transformation initiatives that says that's got to stop. We're going to put all these boundaries around it, and we're going to go to a centralized model where it's all about control and spend under management. Like, how much can we drive through the procurement organization? You do that and you realize that's pissing a lot of people off, and, not helping me build relationships. And also, I don't have the capability and the bandwidth to be able to manage all that stuff. So I'm going to go to a center-led model, which is like, I'm picking my battles. I'm giving some different buying channels to folks in the business. I'm starting to build a center of excellence. And that's kind of where we are. Although most businesses still go through that continuum to get there, that's mostly where we end up today. I really believe that we're going back to decentralized, but it's not the decentralized that it was before. It's decentralized from procurement is the invisible touch. And so now the technology and the guardrails and everything exist, and the technology enables people to go and buy the stuff that they want in a way that's a lot more user-friendly, which is supported by a center of excellence. So there'll be a greater centralized kind of center of excellence model. But that goes to the question then that I said right at the beginning of where I want to focus is, okay, so what now? So what are you going to do if that happens and you've decentralized most of the buying? What's left? And that's what we got to figure out pretty quickly. Is okay, what now? Because I think that becomes the existential question of, what do you do when that happens? Because what's the role for procurement in the organization when it does?
Yeah. And could that be like it's kind of the integration between suppliers and companies, that to the extent things get more decentralized and call it even outsourced, right?
Yeah.
That then it really becomes a bit of that. I mean, today it'd be called like vendor management, but really there's just this like integration management, because the ability to have things just say summarized with AI between companies, that still needs to be, that partnership still is going to have people that need to work together. And there's kind of this, it goes back to your empathy and working with folks.
Yeah. I mean, the skill set that there was a report that Zip did called State of Spend. And in that they asked they surveyed people cross-functional, so it wasn't just procurement people, and they asked, what are the skill sets that you're focusing on in the future because of AI, and like every single function said data literacy, digital literacy, and the third one was something that was unique then to their function. The one that procurement leaders picked in this survey for them was a supplier performance management skills. So it's about going post-contract rather than pre-contract, and kind of changing where we focus. So that's kind of an interesting one when you think about supplier management. And usually procurement today gets to a point of signing the contract, and then just kind of throws the contract off into the ether and lets the business do whatever they want. And then when things don't work, the business comes back and tells procurement to fix it. So it's much more raw in how do you maximize the value of the relationships that you have in place. I think that the holy grail for us is to figure out how we can tell a story that connects procurement impact with revenue. So that's a big part of, I think, where we really have to get serious in terms of being able to show direct connections, as opposed to just on the cost management or the risk management side.
Yeah, that's exciting to me because it feels like we've always given lip service to the supplier management portion that is the upstream portion of procurement. But yeah, maybe we should have some T-shirts made, Occupy Supplier Management, because a lot of talk but no action. But I would love to see it go.
Make supplier management great again.
Yeah, that's exactly
hats and
right.
T-shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting, as we kind of wax philosophical here on some of these topics, and I hear you're taking the meta view, kind of pulling yourself out of procurement and looking down. One of the things that I've always maintained since my earliest days in procurement is that we lack an industry spokesman, a spokesperson. It feels like we don't have somebody who people can point to and go, yeah, that's procurement. It's that person right there, and listen to what they're saying about it. Strategy function has it. Even HR people kind of have their own certain spokespeople. Yeah. I always felt we were lacking that, and we needed that to elevate the way people think about procurement. I would say you're as close as we get to someone like that. Do you feel like you're a spokesperson for procurement?
Not really, but I don't have I don't get joy from, people listening to what I say, if you know what I mean. I mean, I'm like, there's certain people out there that they may like to listen to their own voices, right? And so it's like that's what they strive for. That I don't strive for that. I'd probably be happier if I was behind the scenes working on everything and there was other faces of the business. So I try not to do that. I think that we do need that as a profession. I talk. Honestly, I think that some of the professional organizations have failed us, because you look at some of the professional organizations and associations in the procurement space, and what is their job? It's to advocate for procurement outside of procurement. And there is absolutely nobody, well, there is somebody that is advocating for procurement outside of procurement, and that's somebody that works for a consulting company that's just done a finance transformation that goes and says you can transform procurement next. And that's where, executive level people listen to others on what procurement can be. There is nobody else that's out there that's advocating for what we can be, which is, I think, one of the things that inhibits our growth.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think if there's any place that we could join forces, I'd love to join forces with you on that, because that could really make a difference for our industry.
Yeah, I think we need it.
Yeah. That's great. That's fantastic. Well, Phil, you've been an incredibly engaging guest. No surprise there. Glad we could finally put this together and get the two podcasts on at once here. Tom and I are both humbled and honored that you'd come and speak to us, and we hope that maybe we can turn this into a bit of an annual thing, perhaps.
Yeah, I'd love to
start doing some forecasting. Start doing some. Yeah, we can have some fun with each other.
I know, Alan, as I've said, you were one of the very first people that believed in what we were doing. So, it's been an honor for me to reconnect with you over the past couple of years as well. And it's a no-brainer for me to come and share the airwaves with you for today. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we will certainly do this again then. Well, on behalf of your humble hosts here at the Rebuild Procurement Podcast, we are Tommy Finn, the guy who puts the fin in finance, and your OG in procurement. That's me, Alan Veek, hoping that you will make this a powerful and productive week in procurement. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Show me, and you won't hear the word retail.